one instance, however much talked about globally it may be, I would think is not going to be indicative of how well Indian financial markets are governed. Indian banking sector today is at a comfortable level. India remains as before absolutely well-governed, stable government and also very well, regulated financial market.
सेबी और आरबीआई तो दो संस्थाएं हैं जिनको जांच कराना जरूरी है, पर हम मानते हैं कुछ निष्पक्ष जांच की जरूरत है।
सेबी ने भी इनको फेल किया है, सरकार ने भी उनको फेल किया है, इसीलिए हम चाह रहे हैं कि एक जॉइंट पार्लियामेंट्री कमेटी का गठन हो।
Hello everyone, you're watching News Epicenter with me, Maria Shakil. Amidst the ongoing storm over the Adani FPO, Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman spoke to Network 18 on the entire controversy. Finance Minister said that SBI and LIC, who were the key investors, have issued detailed statements over the matter and the markets are well regulated. She says that one instance of volatility is not indicative of the India story, adding that the banking sector is strong and investor confidence is high. This comes in the wake of the Hindenburg report ahead of the Adani FPO, which has also caused a storm in Parliament. The opposition has demanded an independent investigation and has accused the government of a cover-up. And amidst this controversy, has the Finance Minister reassured investors of the strength of the Indian economy and the ambition of the budget. Moreover, is the opposition playing politics of conjecture over a foreign report on the Adani Group? First, let's listen in to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who spoke exclusively to Network 18 Group Editor-in-Chief Rahul Joshi.
Your budget was very well received by the markets. In fact, while you were speaking, the markets were really going up. But the rout in the Adani stocks somewhat spoiled the party. There is a general nervousness in the market. How does your government see this?
I look at the budget for having covered all the sections of the society. We've tried, and it has been a detailing that which has consumed a lot of time in preparation of this budget. The details is what has brought the difference in touching so many different sectors and segments of our society. We've got something on offer for each one of them. So therefore, if it's being received very well, I'm very glad. But of course, that motivates me to be able to now take it upon myself to better implement it down to the last person who's aimed at. So I would think the impact of the budget, the immediate impact of the budget on the market, and subsequent to, let's say, for whatever reason it trailed back, I think in the next few days the budget's impact will still continue to hold the markets high.
The opposition is taking aim at your government, saying that the banking and insurance companies have large exposure in Adani stocks. And the investors and the broader market is looking to you for some direction on this issue. Is our banking and insurance system resilient to take this shock?
I want to recall the words, coming from the horse's mouth has greater credibility. Both SBI and LIC have issued detailed statements. And I know the chairperson or the CMD has himself come out and explained how they are not overexposed or whatever they said. Yes. And also said, look, we are sitting over profits for the exposure that we have, which is well within the limit. That's what I understand they have said, and I've again read it through the media. They have very clearly said that their exposure is very well within the permitted limits, and that they are, even now with the valuation falling as well, they are still sitting over profit. So if that is the horse's mouth, as I refer to, word from the horse's mouth, but in general, both with the RBI, we do have the Financial Stability Board's meeting, which happens once in 6 months. We meet, even recently we have met. So I can only very clearly say both the RBI and We, because of the FSB's meeting, Financial Stability Board's meeting, know that the Indian banking system, if anything, at this stage, for me to use this word, I want to use it with a sense of responsibility, like having gone through the twin balance sheet problem, Indian banking sector today is at a comfortable level with their NPAs coming down to absolutely low levels, recovery is happening, and their position is very sound, which gets reflected in the fact that when they go to raise monies in the market, they are absolutely comfortably raising monies as well. So the entire macroeconomic analysis which any expert would do also highlights the fact that how comfortable the Indian banks are placed in. That cannot be that if they are at risk.
Some of the global investors as well, as a knee-jerk reaction, seem to have pulled out some money in the last couple of days. Some have put, fresh investments on hold. What would your message be to the global investors?
India remains, as before, an absolutely well-governed, stable government and also very well, regulated financial market. And as a result, I think the investor confidence which existed before shall continue even now. Our regulators are normally very, very stringent about certain governance practices, and therefore they should, one instance, however much talked about globally it may be, I would think is not going to be indicative of how well Indian financial markets are governed. So many lessons have been learned over the decades, and therefore I think our regulators have kept our market well in prime and prim condition.
Now, the Reserve Bank of India has reacted to this entire controversy, and the regulator has said, and I'm quoting them, there have been media reports expressing concern about the exposure of Indian banks to a business conglomerate. As per the RBI's current assessment, the banking sector remains resilient and stable. Various parameters relating to capital adequacy, asset quality, liquidity and profitability are healthy. Banks are also in compliance with the large exposure framework guideline. The RBI remains vigilant and continues to monitor the stability of the Indian banking sector. So a decisive statement coming in there from the Reserve Bank of India. The RBI also has said that a central repository of information on large credits database system where the bank reports their exposure of 5 crore and above, which is used for monitoring purposes. As per the RBI's current assessment, the banking sector remains resilient and stable. Pallavi, the fact is that the opposition is questioning regulators. Will this statement actually mean that they realize that the RBI is monitoring, so all is under control?
Yes, and Maria, there's a reason why both the SBI chairperson and why the RBI has also issued a statement to give across a reassurance as far as the investors go, and those who are the consumers also, and those who have operating with the banking sector. It was very important to reassure the middle class and lower middle class, which is exactly what the opposition parties are targeting by saying that this kind of a nexus has actually duped them of their savings. That reassurance hopefully goes a long way, not just for the corporate sector, but more importantly for the people who go to the banks, for the people who have the investments in SBI, for example, that matter. So there are two big reassurances coming in through the statement.
Pallavi, really appreciate your time. Now let's see how all this plays out in the session of Parliament, which will resume on Monday. Pallavi there was talking about SBI chairperson Dinesh Khara, who has also spoken to Network 18 on this entire controversy, and this is what he has said. He said that SBI lent to Adani for projects with tangible assets and cash flow. So in terms of their assets, everything is solid. Mr. Khara has also said that SBI does not see any challenges in their ability to meet the obligations. He has gone on to say that there is no exposure to loans against shares of the Adani Group. The SBI chairman has also said that we are not worried about stock market volatility. And finally, total exposure to Adani Group is 0.88% of our book. Those are his words. Let's listen in to the SBI chairman, and then I open the floor for discussion.
Since you're the largest lender to Adani Group, while we read your statements that the exposure is within the large exposure framework limits, could you tell us more about what the absolute quantum is? If there's any sort of concern there, if you've increased provisions or will look to increase provisions because of what's been happening, with the stocks in the last few days?
Two questions which you have asked. I will answer the first question in terms of how the asset book look like. I expect our effort and endeavor would be to keep the credit cost as low as possible. And the kind of trend which you have seen for the past 2 quarters, our endeavor would be to keep the credit costs around the same levels. But also, I think I'm a bit bullish in terms of how the economy looks like. So that is one of the reasons why perhaps in the near term, in this quarter, perhaps we should be in a position to see that kind of a credit cost. And the quality of assets, I don't envisage any challenge in the quality of assets. Your second question in terms of exposure to Adani, we have lent to Adani for projects which are in fact having tangible assets and which are having adequate cash generation, and they have been in a position to meet their obligations. And as far as the quantum is concerned, that is actually just about 0.8-0.9% of our total loan book. So from that point of view, we don't envisage any kind of a challenge in terms of their ability to service the loan obligations which they have taken.
So certainly it appears very reassuring about the health of the Indian banking sector. But what about the politics that is playing on it? Let me bring in the politicians and the panelists on the show. Sanju Verma, BJP national spokesperson. Mohan is the Congress spokesperson. Tapati Ghosh is partner Deloitte India. Saket Dalmia, President, PhD, Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Yogendra Kapoor is economist. I'm going to begin with the politicians. Mohan, the SBI and the RBI have come up with statements which is certainly reassuring. My question then would be, does the opposition distrust Indian regulators? You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, there we go. I think, can you hear me now?
Yes, please, go ahead.
So I wouldn't put it that way. I wouldn't say that we distrust regulators. I think let's look at how this is played out, right? The entire free fall in Adani shares started to happen after the Hindenburg report came out, where there were fairly valid questions raised, none of which were appropriately answered by the Adani Group in their 400-page response, which they took to, nationalism as the sort of basis of their entire response. What we are asking for is an inquiry into why the LIC is subscribed to an FPO when the shares were already in free fall, an FPO that the Adani Group themselves rescinded on the very next day. What we're asking for is why banks, I think most of the 30% of the group's debt is coming from nationalized banks. If indeed much of this debt has been issued on the basis of shares, and these shares are now in free fall.
No, but isn't it a fact that despite rout, LIC has still managed notional profit by investing in Adani companies?
I'm sure they are sitting on some value right now based on when they actually got into these stocks. The question is when the stocks are already in free fall and when there is a report out there that raises serious questions around corporate governance, around round-tripping of funds, around a series of questions, why would then LIC go in and subscribe to that FPO?
Since all these questions are about perhaps the government not giving a clear answer, but the finance minister has allayed those fears. Sanju, are you sensing pure politics here, or are you of the opinion that the government will ensure that the parliament functions, because the opposition certainly has united against the government and they are looking at cornering you on this issue?
Okay. Maria, first and foremost, congratulations to your entire team, your channel, for being the first one to elicit that interview out of the finance minister. And I think she left nothing to imagination. She, took on every gauntlet thrown at her. I will just have, these numbers out for the benefit of your audience, which basically, as they say in Hindi, दूध का दूध, पानी का पानी हो जाता है. What is the total debt of Adani? The total debt of Adani Group, Maria, is rupees 2 lakh crore. Out of which it is in the public domain. I've been through the balance sheets and profit and loss statements, and I think I know to read them a lot better than a lot of other people. Out of this 2 lakh crore debt, 1 lakh crore has been raised by way of international bonds, green bonds, international markets, which means 1 lakh crore worth of debt was raised from Indian banks, financial institutions, and other Indian entities. Now, out of 1 lakh crore, you assume that SBI, SBI's exposure, as the SBI head honcho himself said, is 0.89% of their total portfolio, which means if I translate that into absolute numbers, SBI's total exposure to Adani in absolute terms is in the region of 25 to 26,000 crores, give or take a little bit. Now, Maria, you have to listen to this number very carefully. What is the total outstanding bank credit of Indian banks today? It is 131 lakh crore. And out of this, 25% is accounted for by SBI by virtue of being one of the largest banking behemoths in the country. 25% of 131 lakh crore means that SBI's outstanding bank credit in the system today is close to 33 lakh crore. Out of 33 lakh crore, the exposure to Adani is barely 25 or 26,000 crore, which translates into 0.8 or 0.9% of their total portfolio. So why this halabaloo saying that, the heavens are falling? And just I will end by giving one more example. LIC has come out with numbers again. LIC said our holding cost of purchasing Adani stocks amounted to 30,127 crore. Despite the crash in Adani Group stocks, which have lost a huge amount of market cap, nobody is denying that. LIC says we are still sitting on profit of 56,147 crore. So if you just do a basic math, it means despite the crash in Adani stocks, LIC is still sitting on a profit of 86%.
Yes.
So again,
so there are a lot of numbers there, Sanju, that has been, spoken about by you. Let me get others as well, and I'm going to come back to you on the politics of it all, because what is playing out certainly is that the parliament has been stalled and the entire opposition is looking at cornering the government. Saket, isn't 0.97% LIC investment and 0.88% SBI's exposure in Adani stocks too low to rock these behemoths? Saket, if you can hear me.
Yeah, hi. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I think good point, and I definitely agree with that point of view, that I think we have a lot of depth in our banking system now and in our investment fraternity. And definitely these numbers do not rock the system in any way. I think the stock markets itself are evident, are saying the same thing. If you see, there hasn't been a sell-off in Indian equities in any way globally. So I don't think anybody is challenging the way India is operating. There doesn't seem to be any kind of an indication that there's an overall disaster which is taking place in a market. Definitely Adani being one of the large players globally, if something like that happens, how does the government react? How do the major investors and major borrowers to them react? I think they have reacted very, very transparently, and they have come forward and explained their position. I think that's an excellent move by the government, the FM herself, and the large investors like LIC and the bankers like SBI. That transparency and trying to explain that, end of the day, it's not going to rock their boat, and even if this goes bad, it's really not going to impact them to that extent.
Do you think,
that is going to
do you
put
think the finance minister speaking, reassuring the international community that all's well as far as Indian banking system is concerned, it's resilient and robust? You have the RBI issuing a statement, you have the State Bank of India talking about it. All these are assurances strong enough And will it mean that whatever has happened in the last 1 week, the worst may be over?
Good point. So I think, see, first of all, if something like this happens, is there communication from the people concerned? Yes. I think that's a big thing. And that takes care of most of the things. Now, are they empty promises from the lady who just explained to us just before us? Obviously, it's just a drop in the ocean. So it doesn't affect us in any way in terms of the entire financial system of India. So I think we are in a very comfortable position. And when large companies like this get shaken up, I think India has the ability and the depth now that we can, move ahead.
Okay.
And
Let me just tell you, the lady who spoke just before you
is
BJP spokesperson and an economist herself, who has written books on how the government has functioned and its economic, the roots and how it is. Her name is Sanju Verma. Coming on this, Yogendra Kapoor.
Yeah.
Isn't banking exposure in the Adani group backed with collateral?
See, first thing I would like to say is that Mr. Adani is not Sensex or India, and likewise, Sensex or India is not Mr. Adani. We have a very strong and robust stock markets which are running fundamentally strong, not in the last 2 to 3 years when Mr. Adani's stock had taken a strong, I would say skyrocketing in the last 3 to 4 years. If we look at last 8 years, the Sensex was around 25,000 in 2014 and it's well around 60,000 now. So it's not that the stock market is run on 1 or 2 stocks as such. Coming to the exposure part, we have to understand that the nature of businesses in which Mr. Adani has spread over relate to airports, its water management system, roads, mining. Now, these are such nature of businesses which require huge capacity utilization as well as investments. They require strong fundamentals to run those businesses. And unless and until you have strong asset exposure, the banks do not give any kind of, funding or limits or facilities to a lender as such. So my belief is that the
fundamentals are strong.
Yeah.
But then how do we forget that this company, Tapati, has lost $100 billion? My question then is that if the fundamentals are so strong, then what is really going wrong? Has Adani refused, delayed, defaulted any loan repayment interest so far in all these years of their functioning?
See, in fact, it's a matter of fact that if one looks at Mr. Adani's nature of businesses in last over 2 decades, you will see that he has spread over in terms of new businesses that he has acquired over this period of time rather than winding up with the businesses that he had started. So that in itself is a reflection of the fact that how strong his fundamentals are in terms of the new businesses that he has spread his wings into.
Okay. Okay, Tapati. Yeah. Tapati, help me understand that part, that the question that I had asked. Then why are we seeing the Adani stocks almost take a nosedive? Ms. Ghosh, if you can hear me. Tapti Ghosh, can you hear me? Okay, I think there is some problem with that line. But I'm going to go to Sanju there. Sanju, there is this issue that the opposition is talking about. No, but before that, let me bring in Mohan Kumar Mangalam. Mohan, here is Saket Dalmia, who is president of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We have an economist here in Yogendra Kapoor. I will say that, don't count Sanju as an economist, although she is one. She may be seen as a BJP spokesperson here. But all of them are talking about what is solid in this company in terms of its stocks, in terms of its assets. It's not like any other market company only, So are we like dismissing them as a chit fund or something?
No. Nobody's dismissing them as a chit fund. God, they're not even close to being a chit fund. But what they're perpetrating, as per what the Hindenburg report alleges, is far more nefarious than what any chit fund would do. Secondly, I must reiterate that I didn't hear the other two panelists go on about how stable Adani is, but more about how the Indian markets and the banking system are deep enough to take any shock.
So take it on those lines. Just talk about it in the context of the Indian market and the Indian banking system.
I am not saying the Indian banking system is going to collapse or the Indian markets are going to collapse if Mr. Adani's companies collapse. I'm only making a simple point, which is why did LIC subscribe to the FPO, given the valid questions that were raised in the Hindenburg report? And what are the answers to some of those questions? Why is SEBI silent on this? Why isn't an investigation being launched into one company being an offshore company and it, being linked to a whole set of other offshore entities, investing 99 or 90% or more of their funding into the Adani group? The allegation is pretty open and free to all to see, which is that Adani's used round-trip money to...
do you think the problem began...
Let me finish for once.
Problem began with the statement that was issued by the Adani group, in which they said that this is an attack on India. Then it became about some really bizarre explanations. They could have just gone with responding to the questions that were raised in the Hindenburg report.
Okay. Maria... I think I would first like to answer, this question you asked one of the earlier panelists, but I think her audio was perhaps not working. That was a very nice question as to why is it that if nothing is wrong, Adani stocks are falling like a pack of cards. And, I'm not going to shove things under the carpet. Anyone who has basic understanding of Indian stock markets, and I worked for more than 2 decades in some of the world's biggest global investment banking firms, like JP Morgan, so I know more than a thing or two. I'll tell you this, there are 3 things that determine stock prices. It's sentiment in the immediate term, it's liquidity in the medium term, and it's valuations in the long term. Now Hindi mein kahavat hai, behti ganga mein haath dhona. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of a better analogy, but the reason I say this is when there is entire momentum and a stock is caught in a bear trap, short sellers, they go for blood. In stock market parlance, everybody wants to make a quick buck. And that is precisely what happened with Dhirubhai Ambani in the 1980s. But then there was a short squeeze, which means that the short sellers were trapped and they ended up losing money and face. Now, whether Adani is going to do a repeat of what Dhirubhai Ambani did to his short sellers in 1980, let's wait and watch because picture abhi baki hai. But coming to the more important point, I want to now talk about the political aspect because Congress is baying for the Modi government's blood. And I'm not going to mince my words. From Jairam Ramesh to everybody saying, why is the government not ordering a probe? When did Adani Enterprises open its first flagship unit? It was when Amar Singh Chaudhary of the Congress was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. When did Adani acquire Kandla Port? It was when the Congress was in power in the center and Congress was also in power in Gujarat. When did Adani rename Kandla Port to Adani Port? It was again when Congress was in the center. Who has given Adani permission to set up 1,000 megawatt solar power plant in Rajasthan? It is the Congress government of Ashok Gehlot. Who has allowed Adani to mine coal from the forests in Chhattisgarh?
Okay.
It is the Congress government of Bhupesh Baghel.
Let Mohan respond to this.
There is really nothing to respond to in what she is saying. Is Adani conducting projects in Congress-owned states? Yes, he is carrying out projects. The whole problem here is how Mr. Adani has managed to obtain debt against collateral that is inflated by overseas round-tripping of funds, which is an incredible violation. How he's only actually maintaining an effective 10% float because 15% of the mandated 25% is coming from overseas. We're asking for an investigation into that. We want to know why, when stocks are falling and there's a massive capitulation of those shares, why LIC would ascribe to an FPO when, as Sanju so eloquently puts it, short sellers are putting the short squeeze on that particular stock. LIC isn't a hedge fund. It's not a venture fund. It doesn't have to take these calls. So it's obviously being pressed into making these calls, and those are the questions that we're seeking answers to. We're not saying the Indian banking system is going down. We're not saying when the Indian story is over. We're talking about one company not being investigated into because of its proximity because of its proximity to the Prime Minister.
Now I need to make my point. I did not heckle him.
Sanju, quickly.
Yeah, quickly, it is only this. You know, you raise fingers at RBI, at LIC, at SBI. I have given you the numbers. The exposure of LIC is less than 1%. Exposure of SBI to Adani is less than 1%. I did not heckle you.
Right?
Maria, I refuse to debate like this. Maria, I refuse to debate like this.
Hold on.
Let us now continue to have
does
a monologue. I
SBI's
did not
balance
heckle
sheet
him.
have to come under crisis for us to ask the question?
Okay, I have a question to Saket Dalmia. Saket Dalmia, will not other short sellers be encouraged by Hindenburg action and target other Desi companies?
Let me come in here.
One moment.
So
Yes, one
so
moment.
good.
Let me make a small point.
So good.
Okay, quickly. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Sanju. Go ahead. Haan.
Let me make a very small point because it's very important to understand this. Any investor, and normally stock prices over the long run go up not because speculators trade in and out of stocks, but because investors buy or sell stocks with a long-term vision. Now, any investor who buys an infrastructure company will look at only just one ratio. That is called the interest cover ratio, which for Adani is 1.8 times. For global infrastructure companies, it is 1.2 times. Higher the interest cover ratio, better is the financial position of a company.
That's very well explained. Saket, quickly. Yes, respond to my question because this will be seen as.
So I think.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think a good question that reports like this, can it create a bear environment, and can it create such environments where shares can tank? Definitely yes. And did it do for Adani? I guess that triggered it, definitely. I don't know what the impact is because I have not analyzed Adani to that extent. For me, the most important concern as a chamber is that, how is the financial market or the financial system of the Indian economy look like after something like this? So when I look at the broad-based share prices of companies, I see stability. When I see the working of the Indian system, I see stability. So those are great signs, I think. And if one particular company, which is of such a large size, gets into trouble, does it drag everybody else? I'm very glad to know that it is not dragging everybody else. So there is robustness in the system. There's trust in the Indian financial system, the banking system. And then whatever is the case of, that one particular company, it's a different story. But does it affect all of us to really make us crash? No. I think that's the general reaction.
All right. Thank you so much, Saket Dalmia, Yogendra Kapoor, Mohan Kumar Mangalam and Sanjay.